Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to finish telling you the story of how I knew I was transgender. I covered my childhood in part 1, first 18 years. If you haven't seen that yet, I would recommend watching that first. But today we're going to cover my adulthood and everything from where I left off to the point that I realized I was trans. I was 27 years, 7 months, and 21 days when I realized I was trans. So this video will cover roughly a 10-year period. Making these videos has been amazing. Just to say all this out loud and put it all together and just analyze my life through this lens and putting all the pieces together has just been really freeing and just amazing. And I'm really grateful to you guys for watching these videos and letting me tell this story. It's pretty amazing. And although this video is going to end this story, I still have a lot of stories to tell and a lot of ideas for videos. So I would love it if you guys subscribed, and that way you can keep up with me. Definitely ring the bell so you get notified when I upload, in case I miss a day or upload a little earlier, something like that. But let's finish the story off. I have a lot to talk about, so this video is probably going to turn out quite a bit longer than the first one, but who knows, we'll see. Since it does cover such a long period of time, there are definitely going to be eras that I go over a little bit faster, and then some that I'm going to focus a lot more on because it very much did come and go in waves. I ended with my graduation, so we're going to just start right there. So the first year after graduation, I was pretty much just adjusting to adulthood, getting used to what it's going to be like working and just being an adult man, I guess. I decided not to start college right away. I took a year off just to work and do me, and it was fine. It was a very different experience working at the theater and getting to know so many different kinds of people of different ages, different backgrounds, and things that I just kind of didn't experience growing up in the church, especially. Or most people I interacted with were fellow members of the church. So it was really good for me to get to know all these different kinds of people. I stopped going to church pretty much right after graduation. While I was learning about the real world, I was also trying to unlearn a lot of the shit that I'd been doing, and it took time to figure out that balance. In fall of 2012, so about a year and a half after I graduated, I started college. And I did not care about college at all. I should never have gone. I had no idea what I was doing there. I mostly went because I felt like I was supposed to and had to, but I got there and I just blew off classes all the time. And after a semester and a half, I decided to just withdraw from school because all I was doing was accumulating debt with nothing to show for it. So I stopped going. Shortly after I dropped out of college, I moved out on my own. Well, I moved out with a couple of roommates. It was two of my best friends from childhood. And the apartment we moved into was just my grandma's basement that she rented out to us. So although I was living on my own, I was within walking distance of my mom's house. I was living in the same house as my grandma, and I was living with childhood friends. But it was a big step for me. And once I lived on my own, my life changed a lot. I was a very shy kid growing up. I had very few friends and really no desire to make new friends. But now that I was working and growing up, I was opening up a lot more. And therapy helped with that a lot too. I started making a lot of friends. And I really started to drift away from the Mormon lifestyle. I started drinking and partying, and I'd have these big parties in my apartment where I'd have a bunch of people over. And I was 20, and I was just having fun and living my life and getting to know myself a little bit better. When I was 21, I moved out from that apartment into what I consider my first real apartment. But I was moving further from home and no longer had family. The friends I was moving in with were new friends that I met at the movie theater, two of my best friends at the time and now. So this move felt a lot bigger. I felt like I was really on my own now. And it was really great. I lived in that apartment for 3 years with those two, and we had a lot of fun. I was becoming a bit more comfortable with who I was. I felt cool and popular. I had all these friends. My 23rd birthday party was massive. We went to one of my friends' big houses, and There was like 40 something people there, and it was cool. Like, I was a nobody growing up, and all of a sudden I had all these friends, and it was a good couple of years for the most part. Obviously, still dealing with minor ups and downs and just the stresses of becoming an adult and all my stuff that I wasn't talking about, but I look fondly on those years. One of the biggest things for me that happened during this time, one of my best friends came out to me as gay. Now, growing up, I had kind of a difficult relationship with gay people. I'd never really met one. I have one gay relative, but he wasn't around very often in my life. For the most part, gay people were kind of an abstract idea, something that I heard about and knew existed, but I'd never met one before. What I had heard was from the church, and what they teach you is a bunch of bullshit. But by the time he'd come out to me, I'd grown a ton, I'd learned a lot, and when he came out to me, I was thrilled. I felt nothing but happiness and love and just admiration for him. I was so happy. And it was a big moment for me, because had a friend come out to me even just a couple years earlier when I was still in the church, it would have gone completely differently. Regardless of how I truly felt, I was so deep into this character that I don't think I would have reacted so well. So that was a big moment, and it opened my mind a lot. I haven't discussed my sexuality very much on this channel yet, but that was another thing that I struggled with a lot growing up, especially considering that I was looking at it from the wrong gender's perspective. It was just very confusing to me. I knew that I was attracted to both men and women, and it was kind of different times were stronger in different directions. And after he came out to me, I started really looking at myself and realizing, okay, I need to start thinking about this more. So I never really formally came out as bisexual or anything like that. Was just much more open about my sexuality with people. And that was my first big step to my inevitable conclusion a few years later. For a couple years, I just kept growing, learning more about myself. Those were good years. When I was 23, I went through a pretty severe manic episode. I had not had one in a long time, since high school, on this level. I was getting to the point where things were pretty happy for me, and I'd kind of convinced myself, okay, maybe I've grown out of the bipolar, and maybe I just deal with depression for the most part now. And I was still taking my medication and everything, but I was starting to think about that. And this episode was a rude reminder that that's not something that happens. You don't grow out of this. It stays away for a little bit, but it's always going to come back. So once I snapped out of this manic episode, I was devastated. I knew I was destined to crash into a depression, and things were going really well for me, so I wasn't happy. So I started thinking and reflecting a lot on my life, and through this entire time, I still was dealing with gender dysphoria, but because I was happier and had more positive things to focus on, it wasn't as big of a deal. But when this happened, and I started thinking about my life again, it all came back more than ever. I started thinking about transition again. At this point, transgender people were a lot more talked about in the world, so I was learning more about them, and so was everyone else. So I decided to look into it a little bit again. And this time I found a lot better stuff than I did when I was in high school. There was still a lot of hate, and there still is a lot of hate, but there was a lot of support. I still had not accepted that I was trans, but I had accepted that I was open to the idea of maybe transitioning. So during this time, I started to express myself a bit more feminine. I started shaving my body again. I started listening to girly music, I guess. Got into Taylor Swift and Avril Lavigne and Kelly Clarkson, and that was all I listened to. The stuff that I pretended to hate growing up, that I would jam to in secret. I had this ridiculous plan where I was going to save up enough money and I was going to go out of town alone for the weekend. I was going to rent out a hotel, and I was going to go shopping and buy a dress and gender-affirming clothes and get a makeover and just see how I felt. However, I was terrified to transition. So even though I was thinking about it at this time, it wasn't necessarily exciting for me. If I was gonna do it, I knew it was gonna change everything. I mean, I'm 6'5". I was 300 pounds at this time. I just thought, there's no way if I do this, it's gonna make me happy. I'm never going to be satisfied. So I'm constantly fighting these back and forths of really genuinely considering it and deciding it's not an option. It was a constant battle. I was really gearing up to talk to someone about it. I just wasn't sure how the people in my life were going to react to it. I have the most amazing friends and family who are extremely loving and accepting people. I know that now more than ever. But at this time, the transgender topic was not talked about very much, and it was a bit contentious. I mean, granted, the world was still learning a lot. I still wasn't 100% there, and people learned about this over time. But one evening, a conversation about trans people came up. It was scary, but it was exciting, and I decided that I was going to mostly just kind of sit on the sidelines and listen to their opinions and thoughts, and just use this opportunity to learn without having to start the conversation myself. What was said that night was not meant in a malicious or hateful way. The people I was with were simply stating their feelings and understanding of trans people, and looking back, it honestly wasn't very bad. But in that moment, to be sitting there on the verge of telling someone I think I might want to explore this, and hearing things that invalidated me, it made me question everything. I decided that day that even if I was trans, I was never going to go through with it, so there was no point in telling anyone about it. This incident kicked off probably the most severe and longest manic episode I ever went through. I decided that I was wrong about being trans, and maybe I just hated my body because I was out of shape and I just wasn't where I wanted to be in life, and I hated being a man because I'd never really given it a fair chance. Since I thought that I could never have the body that I wanted, I was going to work with what I had. So I started a diet the following day. I was obsessed with this diet, and I was strict. All I was doing was counting my calories. I was staying at least 1,000 calories below my daily output, because that averages losing 2 pounds a week. And for an entire week, I never broke that limit. And then Friday night came around, and I went to a party, and I had a rude awakening that night. Alcohol has a lot of calories. So at that party, I was taking shots and drinking and logging every drink in my calorie counter, and I quickly hit my limit and quickly doubled my limit, and I was very disappointed in myself. I didn't want to stop drinking because I enjoy it, and I do have fun a lot of the times when I drink. Especially at that time, I hadn't had a lot of bad experiences with drinking. It was mostly just a fun thing that I liked doing. But every time I drank, I was going to surpass my budget. I'm a big person. It takes a lot to get me drunk, and I wasn't willing to stop that. So I found a morbid solution. I would make sure that whenever I drank, I would drink enough to throw up and purge all the calories that I had just drank. I did this once or twice a week for 10 months. I convinced myself that it wasn't a problem because I was like, it's not bulimia or anything because I'm not putting my finger down my throat and making myself throw up. Like, I'm drinking anyway, and drinking makes you throw up sometimes. It's just a side effect of it, I guess. So I justified it, and it was working. I was losing more weight. I was losing weight faster. And in 7 months, I had lost 80 pounds. There were days that I would just be shaking uncontrollably. I was exhausted all the time. I had no energy. And I didn't realize for a while that this was a big problem, because drinking enough to throw up doesn't just make you throw up. Like, I was getting blackout drunk every time I drank. I would try to save it, I guess, for like the end of the night. Basically, I would drink normally, have fun, stay on everyone else's level, but then once everyone else went to bed, I would take like 6 shots in a row. And most nights, no one even knew I was doing that, but There were a few nights that I thought I was being more secretive, but I was not. I was falling and I was breaking things. A lot of my most shameful moments happened in those blackouts. I was very lucky, and after a while, one of my best friends stepped in and he called my parents. My parents ended up coming over to my house that night. I was still recovering from the previous night. It was one of those days I was just shaking, hadn't left my bed all day, and my parents walk in and I didn't know why they were there. And they just start talking. We heard this is happening and we want to know what you're thinking, what's going through your mind. They handled the situation so well. I explained to them my thought process and told them it was more important that I was losing weight and it was helping, and tried to justify it to them, and I wouldn't admit that it was a problem. They just listened to me and they gave me advice, but they didn't tell me what to do. And after they left, I really started thinking about it. Within that week, I realized they were right. This had to stop. I was very, very depressed during this time as well, which is definitely part of the reason I was drinking so much. Although I stopped drinking as much and stopped blacking out, I still was not willing to stop drinking, because still it was a coping mechanism for me and I was having fun with it. So I decided instead I was just gonna stop my diet. I'd lost 80 pounds. I was looking a lot better. I didn't feel better, but I did feel better about myself, and I decided that I was satisfied with that weight loss and decided I was just gonna stop counting my calories. But I picked up a lot of good habits during that diet. I still am much more mindful of what I eat. I haven't put the weight back on. I've actually lost even more weight since then without making myself throw up, and I'm proud of myself for that. But I'm so glad that I was able to get out of that before it got even worse. And I'm really lucky that my friend stepped in. So I did start feeling better physically, obviously, but I wasn't happier. I decided if I was going to stop my diet, I had to still do things to be a man and things like that. So I started working out a little bit, but that didn't last long. I went and bought a bunch of nicer clothes. I used to just wear a t-shirt and gym shorts all the time, and I went and bought some button-ups and some nice jackets and nice pants and just started to present myself a little better. But it meant nothing to me. It was all for other people. It was all a costume. And it felt like a costume. It felt like a performance. It was 100% just me doing what I felt like I was supposed to, even though I didn't like it. A little bit after that, I decided I needed to leave the theater. It was time to move on, get a new job. I loved my time there, but I'd been there for 8 years. I'd moved up to management, and it was a good job, but I wasn't gonna go any further, and I needed to change. So I started working at a bank. Felt like that was a more adult and manly job to do. I kept trying to prove myself wrong, and I was miserable. The whole time I was at the bank, I was just coasting. Nothing made me happy. Like I was just numb. I was just existing. Obviously, it wasn't all bad. There are always good times here and there, but during that time, my family had this huge trip to Disneyland. We hadn't been in so long, and that's like my favorite place. I love it there. And we went, and it wasn't the same. I wasn't feeling the joy. I had fun, I guess, but like it was just a thing. It was just somewhere I was. And after that trip, I was really upset with myself. I was just at Disneyland with my family, and I wasn't even happy there. There's something wrong. I was disgusted with myself. I had no self-confidence, no self-esteem. I didn't know who I was or why I was even here. I still knew that I wanted to transition, but it was not an option. I wouldn't even entertain the thought. Anytime I started to, I just felt sad and would distract myself. Then started 2020. I started off 2020 already in a depression that had been going on for a while. In March of 2020, it was my 27th birthday, and my friends came through for me so good. One of my friends planned this big surprise party for me. Another one of my friends flew in like this delicious cake from out of state and made me dinner, and it was a great birthday. And it really reminded me how many incredible people I really have in my life and how many people really love me. And it was helping. I started to kind of come out of my depression a little bit. And then the funniest thing happened. As a Bo Burnham reference. Obviously, COVID happened. And everything changed. I obviously have dealt with a lot of anxiety in my life, and now there was this virus out there that, in the beginning especially, we didn't know what was going on. I was terrified. I was stressed all the time. I was still out working at a bank every day. They were taking precautions, but once again, during that time, we just didn't know a lot, and I was in a constant state of stress. I wasn't seeing my family anymore. We would do video calls from time to time, but it just wasn't the same. Luckily, I did live with some of my best friends, but most of my friends I didn't get to see anymore in person, and oh boy, it hit me hard. I lasted a couple of months, but then I just shut down. For all of spring and summer, I was just in a deep depression. I honestly can barely think of anything I did for myself during that time. I was just sleeping, working, following the news, stressed out. It's all a blur. Summer of 2020, I just felt so alone. Some of my best friends lived right next to me, but I didn't feel like I could talk to them. I tried to talk to my family, but I just didn't know what to say. Everything culminated to October 26th, 2020. I was home, and I knew I had to do something. There's no way I could keep going like this. I was in the worst place I've ever been mentally, and I had no idea what to do. When I tried to picture my future, it was just a fog. I had no idea. I had no direction, no vision. And every hypothetical future I would put together, I couldn't see myself happy. I still can't pinpoint the exact thing that sparked this, but I changed one thing, and I pictured my future as a woman. And immediately, it was like the fog was just lifted, and I could finally see my future. The feeling is indescribable. My brain was flooded with emotions and thoughts, and it was just all coming back. All these moments that I've told you about over these last 2 videos, I started thinking about them and putting a puzzle together. And the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. And I knew for a fact that I'm a woman. And I had to transition. It wasn't an option anymore. Once I saw that future, I literally cannot see any other future. I've never been more sure of anything. And for the first time, I was truly happy. Immediately went into my room and pulled out my journal and started writing because I didn't want to forget. So I'm going to read that journal entry to you guys. It's not that long. It says, "I am a woman. It has taken me almost 28 years to bring myself to say that, even if I can't bring myself to say it out loud yet. This is the first time I have ever fully acknowledged that fact, even if I have thought about it almost every day for as long as I can remember. A part of me has always known, but the other part of me would just dismiss it as a fantasy. I'm writing this down so I can't dismiss it again. I want to have a reminder of the feeling I felt when I realized this. It's the most excited, scared, relieved, and happy I've ever felt all at once. This is going to be a long journey. The hardest part is going to be taking the first step. But I can do this. I will do this. As soon as I catch my fucking breath." And there it is. Every single day since that day has just gotten better. I'm learning more about myself all the time. And to finally be looking at my life through the correct lens explains everything. Like, I didn't just figure one thing out with this one realization. Like, it just kept making more and more sense and explaining things that seemed completely unrelated, and it's incredible. It is hard to believe that it hasn't even been a year yet since that day. I have lived more in the last 11 months than I did for the first 27 plus years of my life. At least lived for myself. I know that I'm who I'm supposed to be, and it's incredible to finally be able to look in the mirror and having what I see match what I feel. I never thought I would be here. It still feels like a dream sometimes. But life is beautiful and magical, and I'm just so excited for tomorrow and every day after that. I also want to say that if anyone watching this can relate to anything that I've said, whether it's in regards to gender dysphoria or my struggle with eating disorders or bipolar, anything like that, I want you to know that you are amazing and you're valid and it's going to be okay. I know it's hard, but no one knows you better than you. And anyone who says they do is full of shit. Everyone deserves to be happy. And you owe it to yourself to be your authentic self. It's worth it. I promise. So much has happened since that day that I cannot wait to tell you about. I wanted to go over my past early so you guys can get to know me better. But for the most part, what I'm going to talk about is going to be from that day forward. I have a lot to tell you. So be sure to subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with my content. I love you guys. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It feels incredible to have said all this out loud. Please leave a comment if you have anything, any questions. If you just want advice, if you want anything, I always read my comments and I try to respond to them the best I can. But thanks again for coming. I'll have a new video soon, but I love you and I will see you next time.